So, hi guys, welcome to this revision tutorial on bioenergetics, and hopefully you've got in front of you the exam questions, and you might have attempted these before you've started to play this video. And so what I'm going to do here is just go through the answers to each of these questions, model some answers for you, just make sure you've got an understanding of what each question is asking you and why it's asking it you, and feel free to watch the video through and mark your work as you go, or play, pause for a bit, mark your work question by question, play and pause. Or it might be that you've attempted one of the questions, you want to go through it and you want to pause it, have a go at the second question, play it again, see what the answers are. And don't forget, with any of these, you can treat it as a revision exercise from memory, see what you can do, see what you can apply, mark it from there. Or it might be that you're using revision material alongside it. There's no problem with either of those. So let's kick off then, without further ado. Now, the first question is a little bit more bringing in information from wider contexts, as it doesn't just talk exclusively about photosynthesis or respiration, but talks about carbon dioxide and talks about how it links into the Earth's atmosphere and changes in the Earth's atmosphere. So reading through the question, it says scientists are very concerned about the changes in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. The graph below shows the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere between 1988, so here, all the way through to 2014. Here. Now, concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in arbitrary units and year along the side. Now, the important thing here, where it says arbitrary units, this is kind of telling you that the units themselves don't matter. It's just to show you that at this point in the graph, there's more carbon dioxide. In this point, there's less carbon dioxide, and just what this amount of carbon dioxide is relative to each other. Obviously, year is time along the way. So, first question, 4 marks. And if you look at the question, it says describe 2 patterns shown in the graph above. So, first and foremost, we know that we need to find our answers in the graph. Describe, as we know the command word, is just stating what you see. What do you see on the graph? Now, patterns, as we know, is just another word for trends. And use data from the graph in your above answer. What's this telling you? Why have they put that there? Use data, in other words, numbers. Be specific about numbers. Mention numbers from the graph. Things change over what range, what carbon dioxide, how many years. Be precise, use numbers. So, a couple of different things you have spotted from this. And this is where you can get your marks. Now, first thing, we look at the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over this period of time. What's happened in terms of a pattern, a trend? There has been an increase. An increase in carbon dioxide concentration. Now, hopefully you'll have written that in a fuller sentence. I'm just doing summaries in terms of where you are getting your marks. So if you put anything about there being an increase in carbon dioxide concentration, get yourself a mark. Now, use numbers. What is the increase? Well, the increase, if you have a look and you read from the data on the graph, data starts at about 364. If you look at the scale here, it goes up to about 418. So what has the increase been? Well, it's been from 364 to 418 arbitrary units. Now, it might be a bit harder to read the scale. So if you were doing that and you were talking about that in terms of data, it might give you a bit of a range. You could say from about 357 to 322 mark scheme would give you. Or you could say, oh, what's that difference? Well, it's a difference of increased by 54 units. That'd be another way that you could get that mark. Great. But we're still looking for some more patterns. So you've got 2 marks there. Now, this isn't just a straight, this isn't just a single line. We have got lots of these, and that's a pattern. that the data rises through peaks and troughs. So it goes up and then down, up and then down, up and then down, up and then down. Now, that's a trend, but we can say even more about it. If you look here, we know that this is 2014. We know that this is 2015. Now, if you have a look in terms of that cycle length from top to bottom, from bottom to top, back to bottom, or top to bottom, back to top, they're each 2 in length. So it's that idea, that these peaks and troughs, each cycle represents 1 year. Each cycle through this peak and trough is 1 year. 2 more places where you can get marks. You've just purely described what you see on the graph in as great level of detail as you possibly can. So, first question. On to the next part of it. 2 human activities that affect the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Well, if you've mentioned anything about combustion, carbon dioxide is a waste product of combustion, that'll give you a mark. Now, you can talk about examples. You could have said burning fossil fuels or driving cars. They are just examples of combustion, and you'd get a mark for saying an example of combustion. But combustion, CO2, is a waste product of combustion. One of the things that increases carbon dioxide, deforestation, cutting down trees. Cutting down trees, that is another big mark that you could get for that. 2 marks for this question. Now, you might talk about other human activities that decrease carbon dioxide concentration, such as tree planting or growing crops. Or you might, because that's kind of the opposite, as it were, because you're not affecting this idea that you're affecting concentration. Either you're increasing it with these examples, or you're decreasing it. So that idea of planting trees, otherwise known as reforestation, that causes the CO2 concentration to decrease, but you're still affecting it. Now, Mark Sheen just say if no other mark awarded, you can get 1 mark for putting respiration. But we want to be talking about activities that humans do in terms of the population, not just respiration on an individual organism level. So these points would definitely be ones to be thinking about that affect either up or down concentration of carbon dioxide. Now, next question. The trend shown in the graph above may continue for many years. Explain what effect the changing concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could have on living organisms. So we know that command word explain is the what and why. In other words, giving reasons for whatever effect the changing concentration of carbon dioxide could have on living organisms. So we've got different things we can get marks for. Higher carbon dioxide concentrations cause global warming. Great. That'll give us a mark. Higher carbon dioxide concentrations is more the raw product of photosynthesis. So plants could photosynthesize faster. Now, both of these, more photosynthesis going faster, global warming, cause the temperature rises. And temperature rises could lead to changes in rainfall or extreme weather. Now, both of these, extreme weather, floods, droughts, etc., could lead to a couple of different effects. So it might be that you've got less rainfall, causing desertification, which in itself causes animals to die out, might make drought adapted species, so ones that survive without water or with much less water, becoming more common. Whereas conversely, more rainfall can cause flooding, which might cause losses in habitat. Organisms that live near coast or large water bodies could cause them to extinct. Where else could you get marks? Well, if you think about the opposite, something the opposite says, think about the idea around temperature changes. The temperature rises, what to do? It melts the ice caps. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads back to these points. Causes flooding, loss in habitats, extinction. Now, animals try to survive. So, for example, if any of these occur, you could have changes in organism migration. Organisms trying to move to different places in order to survive, which means actually you change the spread of organisms. Lots of different points you can get marks for there. So have a look at yours, see what you've got, change what you need to, but hopefully you've got some useful points to see how those things link together on this question. Right, on to the next one. Respiration is a process which takes place in living cells. What's the purpose of respiration? Now, don't put anything about making energy. You don't make energy. Remember, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. You can transfer, you could provide, you could release energy. Remember, you have talked about what that energy or store that energy comes in. So you could say that you produce molecule of ATP, chemical energy that's stored as a result of respiration. Now, that's advanced level knowledge. You don't need to put that, but you could put that and get a mark just as well. But I would say really focus on the idea that respiration releases energy. Okay, right. Balance the equation. This is the equation for respiration, same as the equation for photosynthesis. So remember, it's just your 6, 6, 6 in front of everything except the glucose. Right. Turn over onto the next one. Get that answer. Now, the answer for this one, we should be able to recognize the formula for this. What is it? It's glucose, C6H12O6. Now, glucose is oxygen is absorbed through the alveoli in the lungs. Remember, the alveoli are the air sacs, millions of them in the lungs. What are the adaptations for this function? In other words, what are the unique features that alveoli have to help them to absorb oxygen? Well, we might have a few different ones here. It's only 2 marks, but they provide a large surface area. That's 1 mark. They have really thin surfaces. That's another one. And really moist surfaces. That's another one. The alveoli themselves have a good blood supply. Remember where it says how are the alveoli adapted? This doesn't mean that you need to be putting anything about, well, anything about them in terms of why the large surface area helps, or why the moist surface helps, or why the good blood supply helps. It's just how. This is the what are the adaptations. Okay, could be the same question. You should have said what are the adaptations of the alveoli. Name the gas which is excreted through the alveoli. Excreted, another word for given out. Oxygen's taken in, so think opposites. Carbon dioxide. It would also have a mark for water vapor as well. But if you just wrote water, that would be wrong. Remember, it has to be vapor because it comes in a gaseous form, and that's what moves in and out of the alveoli. Right, D. What's the name the name of the process of respiration when oxygen is not available? It's just purely a recall question. Remember, you've got two types of respiration. Where oxygen is available, it is aerobic. What's the other one? Well, it's without oxygen. And if you remember, we refer to that as anaerobic respiration. An, most of that bit without. Now, describe the process of respiration which takes place in human beings when oxygen is not available and give an effect. To follow on. Describe when oxygen is not available. So, describe what happens in anaerobic respiration and also give an effect. Something that happens as a result of it. So you've got a few different things you get marks for. You only got 3 marks here, but you've got plenty of things that you could get a mark for in this answer. Well, you get a mark for saying that that respiration occurs in the mitochondria. You get a mark for saying that glucose breaks down. Now, you could just write a word equation. Glucose breaks down into lactic acid and energy. That arrow, that word equation that you've done on this before, is all you need to write. And if you wrote that, you would get 2 marks. So if you're using mitochondria and glucose breaks down to lactic acid and energy, 2 marks in itself. This idea that lactic acid is produced, another one marks. You got 1. You've got 2 marks here. Now, we haven't spoken of effect. Now, what it's getting at here is what happens because lactic acid is produced and because glucose is broken down. Well, a couple of effects. Lactic acid, we've talked about before, causes cramps and muscle pain. We've talked about the energy that's produced being a quick source of energy to supplement our energy releasing needs when we can't get enough oxygen for aerobic respiration. But because it's a quick source of energy, another thing could also be the mark for here is saying that actually this process of respiration is less efficient than aerobic respiration. Doesn't release as much energy if we were to compare the two processes directly against each other. A variety of different things to get marks for there, just on a slightly longer question. And if you look here, plenty of marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things you could get marks for asking something. But let's go on to the last question, more around photosynthesis and respiration. So a couple of recaps of questions which we've already answered. The equation for aerobic respiration. Well, we should recognize that aerobic respiration is that oxygen and glucose forming water and carbon dioxide. We've mentioned it already. We know that respiration occurs in the mitochondria. two uses of energy released in respiration. So we know that respiration releases energy, but what is that energy released for? Different things. Where could you get marks? Movement is one. We could be more precise and say, well, it's to help contract muscles, because obviously that's what causes movement. Keeps internal body temperature warm. Another mark. Cellular processes that require energy, not diffusion, not osmosis, active transport. And it helps us to build larger molecules. Polymers, as we call. And give a named example if you produce this one. So helps us to make things like proteins, or if you think about in plants and cell walls, cellulose is another thing that it helps to make. So a variety of different things you can get a mark for there. Now, last couple of bits of this one. Describe two differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration in humans. Don't refer to oxygen. So it's not about this is oxygen, uses oxygen, this doesn't use oxygen. What are other things that are different? Well, anaerobic produces something different. Produces lactic acid. And aerobic doesn't. That is a difference. One mark, pointing out the difference between the two. Aerobic, conversely, produces CO2. Anaerobic doesn't. Could say that aerobic produces water, anaerobic respiration doesn't. Another main one probably to think about is that in terms of the energy released, anaerobic releases less energy than aerobic. You have to put that final bit at the end because then it becomes a comparison. If you don't put down aerobic, it's not a comparison against anaerobic respiration. It could be a comparison against anything. So be precise. Be precise. Right. Let's turn on to the last couple of pages. So, thinking slightly more about that idea of anaerobic respiration in plant cells, slightly different. It's not glucose into lactic acid, it's glucose into two other things, carbon dioxide and ethanol. Because remember, this is where anaerobic respiration is used to produce things like alcohol, the ethanol, and carbon dioxide, bread. There's two things just to link that to when we're talking about plants that being different to anaerobic respiration in humans, for example. Now, scientists investigated respiration and photosynthesis using some pondweed and pondweed snail. Diagram this. The apparatus was left in a well-lit room for 5 days. The data log recorded the concentration of carbon dioxide continuously. After 5 days, the scientists completely covered the boiling tube with black paper. Give me a graph of data. Data log continued to record the concentration. Figure 2 shows the concentration of carbon dioxide inside the boiling tube over 15 days. Explain why the concentration of carbon dioxide in the tube stayed the same between day 0 and day 5. Right. Couple of things. Look back at the diagram and you know you've got your snail and you've got your pondweed. So 2 marks here. How does the carbon dioxide concentration leave and how does more carbon dioxide come in to make it stay the same? You've got pondweed. The pondweed takes in CO2. What does it take it in for? Photosynthesis. How does it then stay the same? Well, the two organisms, the pondweed and the snail, aspire, and as part of that, they produce CO2. So it balances out. The amount taken out, the amount taken out, balances out. Those would be the two things you get your marks for. G. Suggest why carbon dioxide concentration increased between day 5 and day 10. Well, here's the key thing. What happened back at day 5? After day 5, the scientist completely covered the boiling tube with black paper. That's where you get your marks here, because you need to use that. If he completely covered the black tube with paper, what does that do? This. It means there's no photosynthesis. If there's no photosynthesis, there's less or none being taken out. There's no CO2 being taken in by the plant. But what's still happening? Second bit here. Plant, the snail, are still aspiring, causing CO2 to increase. Good. And then the last question here, and I'll call it a day. On day 10, the pond snail died. Explain why the death of the pond snail caused the carbon dioxide concentration to increase after days 10. Now, it's dead. What happens to things that are dead? Well, you've got 3 marks, and here's a really easy mark. The snail decays, or is decomposed, or is broken down. 1 mark. What is it that does the breaking down? Well, the bacteria or decomposers that are found in the water. And what do they do? Well, they're living organisms. So those bacteria or decomposers that are found in the water, they carry out respiration. And as a result of carrying out respiration, they also produce or release more CO2 into the water. And so that's your final question there. So hopefully you found this a little bit useful and give you a bit of context to these questions. Obviously, make sure once you've done this, there are the independent practice questions in the link below this video. Make sure you download those and have a go at those. And obviously come back to your teacher with any questions. Otherwise, hope you found this useful, and we'll see you on the next one.